My first trip to Chesil for a while, and I'm fishing the Royal Adelaide. This is at Ferrybridge, near the Portland end of its famous Storm Beach. Many UK anglers, myself included, rate Chesil as one of their favourite venues. I'm targeting black bream, since it's probably still a bit early for the triggerfish. First cast, my rod tip's already rattling before I could even tighten up to the lead. That's a great sign, since I've only got squid with me today. It's probably an indication that bream are about. Normally I'd fish rag tipped with squid, but the local shops were out of supply, so I'd have to make do with small strips of squid until the following day. My tripod is set high and weighted down with a bag of stones. Normally the tidal pull can be quite fierce here, and there's a chance that your rods could get pulled over. However, that wasn't really needed today. There's very little in the way of wind, but the waves are still reasonably high and crashing onto the shingle. The shingle is very steep at the Ferrybridge end, so still safer to set up at the strand line. Having just placed my second rod in the tripod, the tip of the first one pulls down. That's obviously worth striking into, and I feel there's a fish on. Perfect start, a sizable bream on my first cast. Bream are my favourite round fish, and in my opinion taste better than bass, so this gorgeous looking fish has already made this trip worthwhile. Chesil Beach is known worldwide, but for those unsure about its location, I'm going to use Google Earth to pinpoint it. It runs for 18 miles from West Bay to Portland in Dorset. This map shows many of the well-known venues before homing in on the Ferrybridge end. If strong southwesterly winds make it unfishable, you can always resort to the eastern side of Portland, Weymouth Harbour or Preston Beach. The bit I'm fishing in this video is halfway between the bridging camp and Chesil Cove. I've identified nearby alternative venues in Weymouth if it's unfishable. You head for White Regis on the A354 and cross the bridge at the mouth of the Fleet. The Ferrybridge car park has reasonable charges and gives access to the well-known marks that I've identified here. The bridging camp is a bit of a hike, but a bird sanctuary, Royal Adelaide and landing craft within easy walk of the car park. Or rather, it would be easy if it wasn't for the energy-sapping, sheer steepness of the shingle. It doesn't look that steep in its pan view, but anyone who's trudged this end of a big beach knows it's not for the faint-hearted. This video covers a late August afternoon and early evening session, followed by a few hours in the morning the following day. I didn't night fish it as I was short of bait and needed to hit the tackle shops early in the morning. I'm using my Comic 07 rods and Pen Affinity reels. One reel is loaded with 30-pound braid and has a standard clip-down rig which I use with my bream fishing. This has short snods and size 6 and size 8 B938 hooks. My other setup is lighter, comprising a tube boom rig with size 12 and size 10 hooks. The main reel line here is 20-pound braid. This is the rig I caught my first fish on and generally outperforms the other one if you're just getting loads of little taps. I've explained how I make these and fish with these in a previous video which I've linked to in the top right hand corner. The hook lengths are 8-pound fluorocarbon, which sounds a bit light for this type of fishing, but rest assured it can get decent fish in as well. I have had several undulate rays from the bird sanctuary area using these rigs. Obviously you wouldn't set out to catch those using this rig, but it's surprising how larger fish will take a tiny little bait intended for a different species. 5-ounce breakaway continental lead allows me to move this rig around quite a bit. This means you can drag it just after casting, and when you get those little knocks, you don't have to keep putting your rig in and recasting all the time. If you strike and miss a bite, you can just leave your rig there, and the bream will often have another go. And sometimes moving your rig is what's needed to trigger a bite. Other times, quickly recasting the same spot helps, and sometimes you'll get bites on the drop. Tidal pull is from left to right at the moment, but will change round Quite often it's at that change when you get most of your bites. I'm fishing at distance, trying to reach the broken panels of the Adelaide wreck. You can catch bream closer in, but underwater features tend to hold more fish, so if at all possible I prefer to head for this mark. If this area is too busy, then I prefer to fish in front of a bird sanctuary. I'm getting tiny little taps all the time, so I'm standing near my rods and sometimes holding them, ready to strike. Far more bites are missed with a rig with the larger hooks, but sometimes you get a bigger fish on it. Small fish will peck away at the squid, stripping your hooks. This is very active fishing, and got to be prepared to strike at a moment's notice. I missed that one, but then the fish takes again as I'm moving the bait. And I feel that I've connected this time. Another reasonably sized black bream, this time to the heavier of the rigs. The current has already changed direction now and is running from right to left, so I swap my rods round. So the rig with a 6-ounce grip lead is cast further updrift, and I'm allowing the lighter rig to bounce a bit more down towards my left. Another knock to the light rig, which I miss. These knocks are more like taps, and are probably from smaller fish. After a few attempts, I eventually hit into one of those. Definitely a much smaller fish, and this one's a nicely striped pouting. Another black bream to the heavier rig. Then a double shot of pouting, but one falls off as I'm pulling the rig out of the water. Yet another pouting on the light rig. Tube boom rig has fine wire silver hooks, with the bottom two being size 10 and the top a size 12. I'm baiting up with tiny little bits of squid, no more than about an inch in length. You don't really want too much of a squid hanging off the bend of the hook, otherwise a tiny little pouting, a tiny little bream will just pull the bait off your hook. good little trick to prevent the smaller fish pulling off your bait off bigger hooks is to use some bait elastic. Here I'm securing the squid on a size 6 hook on my heavier rig. Some of the squid is still present on the middle hook, so all I need to do is add a little bit more and secure that. Again, I'm trying to ensure that there isn't much dangling off the end of the hook. Incorporating cascade swivels in your rig making allows you to clip the rig down to get that extra distance. This rig is one I prefer to use for bream at places like Milford Shingle Bank. If you're interested in making these, I've placed a link to a video tutorial in the top right hand corner and in the description for this video. Time to have a go for mackerel. I stop and set up my Arcadia rod with small Dayglow feathers on size 4 hooks. A 2-ounce lead is all I need to get good distance with this, and allows me to fish the surface layers, or I could just let it drop down and fish deeper in the water. By all accounts, Chesil hasn't been fishing that well for mackerel this year, and I'm not very hopeful since I haven't seen anyone catch any. Normally, you'll get an indication of their presence either by seeing some surface activity, or I'd catch one on a bream rig as the rig falls through the water. My heavier bream rig, the shiny holographic sequence, this quite often gets you a mackerel or two. When there's plenty of mackerel about, you can get them at any state for tide, but when there aren't many, I find you're more likely to get them when light is fading and at the top of a tide. That's why I haven't tried for them earlier in the session. A few casts with no response, so it's time to go back to concentrate on catching bream. Normally you get more activity towards the top of the tide, but on this occasion there's not a lot happening, so I can relax a bit. But then the fish decide to feed again. Another black bream as the sun starts to set. That was bream number 7. One last go on the feathers. Take at last, but doesn't feel like a mackerel. one of two scad to finish off the day. So, not one of my best here, but a reasonable session nonetheless. The guy in the beach buddy further to my right ended up with one gurnard. It's a bit disappointing not to catch any mackerel, but I should be grateful at least for my 7 bream and 7 pouting. One of my pouting towards the end was a reasonable size and not striped like the other ones. The following day was a bit windier, but the wind was off your back, and surprisingly the sea was flat calm compared with the previous day when there wasn't any wind. After buying some ragworm, I headed off for the same spot. This time there was another angler fishing just left of where I wanted to go. Different rigs this time, since I wanted to catch on the ragworm. I still set up my standard bream rig, but also set up a straightforward 3-hook clip-down rig with Aberdeen hooks. This time on standby I went for 3-hook short boom rig. This is still a good choice for bream, and the ragworm on top hook has been tipped with squid. With gin clear water, conditions still look good for bream, but the angler to my left, Tony, hadn't had a bite. I had to be somewhere else in the afternoon, so this was going to be a very short session over high water. I was still determined to catch something though before leaving, and I was hoping it might be a gurnard. In contrast to the previous day, there's a lack of early activity. But then I noticed a couple of little taps. Eventually, the little taps developed into a better knock. Fortunately, this bream saved a blank, and once again it's of reasonable size. Time to try the short wire boom rig. No bites on the boom rig, so I swap back to the 3-hook clip down rig. I was convinced that the ragworm would make a difference, but that doesn't seem to be the case today. The previous day I caught, having only used up 2 squid. When nothing's happening, instead of just going through the motions, I like to try out different rigs. The permutation of a tube boom rig that I used the day before is one that's set up as a Wessex rig. This one has a size 4 Aberdeen hanging below the lead, with the 3 booms with small hooks above. The other rig I also tried in this session is one of my standard bream rigs, but with pop-up beads. Unfortunately, even though the sun came out, the fishing didn't improve. I gave all of those rigs a good try out in the 3 hours that I was able to fish. However, nothing else showed other than that one bream. Tony, to my left, did inform me that after I left, he did catch 1 bream and a red mullet. Before I left, he also very kindly gave me 3 of his special continental leads. These he makes himself, but I don't know what they're called, but they will be featuring in future videos. So, despite only catching 1 bream, this was still a really worthwhile session.